The letter arrived on a Tuesday, an unremarkable day that would soon become etched in my memory. I had just returned from court, my suit still crisp despite the sweltering heat of the big city. As I sorted through the pile of mail on my desk, a cream-colored envelope caught my eye. No return address, just my name, Angela, written in a familiar, flowing script that made my heart skip a beat. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Arthur. The name I had buried deep in my past, along with sun-soaked memories of a paradise beach in a small coastal town. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. The scent of sea salt seemed to waft from the paper, transporting me back 20 years in an instant. The letter was brief, just a few lines reminding me of a promise we had made on our last night together. A promise to meet again, 2 decades later, on the same beach where we had shared our dreams and sealed them with a kiss. I sank into my leather chair, the cool material a stark contrast to the warmth spreading through my chest. The world outside my office window faded away as memories flooded back. I saw myself at 18, carefree and full of hope, my feet buried in warm sand as Arthur and I watched the sunset. We had been so certain then, so sure that our love would conquer all obstacles. But life had other plans. I had left for law school, determined to make something of myself. Arthur had stayed behind, unwilling to leave the small town and the sea he loved so much. Our paths diverged, and over time the letters and calls became less frequent until they stopped altogether. Now, 20 years later, I was a successful attorney. I had built the life I had always dreamed of, or so I had thought. As I held Arthur's letter, I realized there was a part of me that had been dormant all these years, a part that still yearned for the simplicity and passion of that summer. The rational part of my brain argued against the folly of honoring such an old promise. I had responsibilities, cases to win, a reputation to uphold. Yet, as I read the letter again, I felt a stirring of something I had not experienced in years. Adventure, possibility, the thrill of the unknown. I glanced at the calendar on my desk. The date Arthur mentioned was just 2 weeks away. Could I really drop everything and go? What would I find if I did? Would Arthur even show up? Or was this letter just a nostalgic whim on his part? As the sun began to set outside my window, casting long shadows across the city I had called home for so long, I found myself reaching for my laptop. Before I could second-guess myself, I had booked a flight and a room in a small inn near the beach where Arthur and I had made our promise. I sat back, my heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. In that moment, I realized that regardless of what awaited me on that beach, I had already taken the first step towards rediscovering a part of myself I had long forgotten. The Angela who had once dreamed of more than case files and courtrooms. The Angela who had believed in the power of promises made under a starry sky. As I closed my eyes, I could almost feel the sand between my toes and hear the whisper of waves calling me back to a place and a person I had left behind. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I would face my past and whatever future it might hold. The 2 weeks leading up to my departure were a blur of conflicting emotions and frantic preparations. By day, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor, determined to leave no loose ends. By night, I found myself lost in old photo albums and memories I had long since packed away. As the date of my flight approached, doubt began to creep in. Was I truly ready to confront the past? The life I had built for myself in the big city was comfortable, predictable. I had worked hard for my position at the law firm, sacrificing personal relationships and leisure time in pursuit of professional success. Now, on the cusp of making partner, I was considering throwing it all into jeopardy for what? A promise made 2 decades ago by 2 naive teenagers? 3 days before my scheduled departure, I nearly canceled everything. I had my assistant on the line, ready to call off my leave of absence, when a framed photo on my desk caught my eye. It was a picture of me from law school graduation, my smile wide and eyes bright with ambition. I remembered that day clearly. The sense of accomplishment, yes, but also the underlying current of something missing. I hung up the phone without canceling my plans. That night, as I packed my suitcase, I realized how little of my current life I was bringing with me. A few casual outfits, a well-worn paperback, my phone, though I doubted it would see much use where I was going. It struck me how different this was from my usual business trips, where every item was carefully chosen to project an image of success and competence. The night before my flight, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with questions. What if Arthur did not show up? What if he did, but he was not the person I remembered? Worse yet, what if he was exactly as I remembered, and I was the one who had changed beyond recognition? As dawn broke, I made my final decision. I would go. Not for Arthur, not for the promise, but for myself. I needed to know if the Angela who had stood on that beach 20 years ago still existed somewhere beneath the layers of professional accomplishments and carefully constructed facades. I arrived at the airport with plenty of time to spare, my usual punctuality asserting itself even in this uncharacteristic adventure. As I waited to board my flight, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Whatever awaited me in that small coastal town, I would face it head-on, just as I had faced every challenge in my career. The boarding call came, and I stood gathering my carry-on bag. As I walked towards the gate, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a nearby window. For a moment, I saw not the polished attorney in designer travel wear, but a flash of the young woman I had once been, eyes alight with the promise of adventure. I boarded the plane, my heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. As the engines roared to life, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In a few short hours, I would be standing on the same beach where I had made a promise that had lingered in the back of my mind for 20 years. Whether that promise would lead to a new beginning or provide the closure I had not known I needed remained to be seen. As the plane lifted off, carrying me towards an uncertain future, I realized that the decision to go was just the first step. The real challenge lay ahead, on a paradise beach in a small coastal town where the echoes of the past awaited my return. The small coastal town materialized before me as the bus wound its way down the hillside. My heart raced as familiar landmarks came into view. The old lighthouse, the colorful fishing boats dotting the harbor, the long stretch of golden sand that had been the backdrop to so many of my youthful dreams. As I stepped off the bus, the warm, salty air enveloped me, a stark contrast to the sterile, air-conditioned environment I had grown accustomed to in the big city. For a moment, I felt disoriented, as if I had stepped through a portal in time. The town had changed, yes. New buildings here and there, a fresh coat of paint on old structures, but its essence remained untouched by the passage of 2 decades. I made my way to the small inn where I had booked a room, my wheeled suitcase creating a rhythmic sound against the uneven cobblestone streets. The innkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes and sun-weathered skin, greeted me with a warmth that felt both foreign and familiar. As she handed me the key to my room, her knowing smile made me wonder if she somehow sensed the weight of my purpose here. Once in my room, I found myself drawn to the window. The view of the beach was just as I remembered, vast, beautiful, and slightly intimidating in its unchanging nature. I unpacked methodically, a habit from countless business trips, but faltered when I reached the bottom of my suitcase. There, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, was a faded photograph of Arthur and me, taken on our last day together. I placed the photo on the nightstand, a tangible reminder of why I had come. The youthful faces smiling back at me seemed to belong to strangers now, yet I could still feel the echo of the emotions captured in that moment. As the afternoon waned, I decided to take a walk along the beach. I slipped off my city shoes, relishing the feel of warm sand between my toes. The sound of the waves, the cries of seagulls, the distant laughter from beachgoers, it all washed over me, slowly chipping away at the protective shell I had built around myself over the years. I walked for what felt like hours, lost in memories and contemplation. The sun was setting by the time I realized how far I had gone. As I turned to head back, my eyes were drawn to a specific spot on the beach. Even after all these years, I recognized it instantly. The very place where Arthur and I had made our promise. I approached slowly, half expecting to see our younger selves there, full of hope and naive certainty about the future. Instead, I found only the eternal dance of waves against the shore, nature's own timekeeper, indifferent to human promises and regrets. Standing there, I was struck by the magnitude of what I had done. I had left behind my carefully constructed life, my routines, my safety net, all for a promise made lifetime ago. The rational part of my mind screamed that this was folly, that I should return to the inn, book the next flight out, and forget this sentimental journey. But as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever happened in the coming days, I knew I had made the right decision in coming here. This place, this moment, was a part of me that I had denied for too long. As darkness fell, I made my way back to the inn, my mind swirling with memories and possibilities. Tomorrow was the day Arthur and I had agreed to meet, 20 years ago. Would he show up? Was he even aware of the date's significance? And if he did come, what then? I fell asleep that night to the distant sound of waves, my dreams a jumbled mix of past and present, of what was and what could have been. In the morning, I knew I would face whatever the tide brought in. The morning dawned with a misty haze hanging over the beach, as if the very air was thick with anticipation. I had barely slept, tossing and turning all night, my mind racing with scenarios of how this day might unfold. As I stood before the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the polished attorney, replaced by someone softer, more vulnerable, dressed in a simple sundress I had not worn in years. I made my way down to the beach, my bare feet sinking into the cool sand. The tide was low, revealing a vast expanse of shoreline. I walked slowly towards our designated meeting spot, my heart pounding with each step. As I approached, I saw a solitary figure standing at the water's edge, his back turned to me. Even from a distance, I knew it was Arthur. His posture, the way he stood with his hands in his pockets, gazing out at the horizon, it was all achingly familiar. 20 years had passed, but in that moment it felt like no time at all. I stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure. Arthur must have sensed my presence, for he turned slowly. Our eyes met, and the world seemed to stand still. He had aged, of course. His hair was flecked with gray, lines etched around his eyes and mouth. But his gaze was just as intense as I remembered, a deep blue that mirrored the ocean behind him. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other, the weight of 2 decades hanging between us. I searched his face for signs of the boy I had known, finding him in the quirk of his lips, the slight furrow of his brow. He, too, seemed to be cataloging the changes in me, his eyes roaming over my face with a mixture of familiarity and discovery. Finally, Arthur broke the silence. His voice, deeper than I remembered, carried on the sea breeze. He spoke my name, just that, but it was enough to break the spell that had fallen over us. I found myself moving forward, closing the distance between us. We did not embrace, did not touch. Instead, we stood side by side, looking out at the ocean. The silence between us was not uncomfortable, but rather filled with unspoken words, shared memories, and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. As the morning mist began to lift, so too did the initial awkwardness of our reunion. We began to talk, haltingly at first, then with increasing ease. We spoke of our lives, our careers, the paths that had led us to this moment. Arthur, I learned, had become a marine biologist, his love for the sea shaping his life's work. I told him of my law career, the cases I had won, the life I had built in the city. Yet, as we talked, I became acutely aware of all that remained unsaid. The pain of our parting, the years of silence, the what-ifs that had lingered in the back of my mind. These topics we skirted around, neither of us quite ready to confront them head-on. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, we decided to walk along the beach. Our conversation ebbed and flowed, punctuated by long stretches of companionable silence. With each step, I felt layers of my carefully constructed persona falling away, revealing the Angela I had once been, and perhaps, in some ways, still was. By unspoken agreement, we found ourselves retracing the steps of our last day together 20 years ago. We passed the old pier where we had shared ice cream, the rocky outcropping where we had watched sunsets, the hidden cove where we had shared our first kiss. Each location was a bittersweet reminder of what we had once been, and all that had changed. As the day wore on, I found myself studying Arthur when he was not looking. The years had been kind to him, the outdoor life he had chosen evident in his sun-weathered skin and lean physique. Yet there was a sadness in his eyes that had not been there before, a depth that spoke of experiences and hardships I knew nothing about. When the sun began to dip towards the horizon, we found ourselves back where we had started. The beach was nearly empty now, the day trippers gone, leaving us alone with the endless sea and our shared history. As we stood there, watching the sky turn gold and pink, I realized that this encounter was both everything and nothing like I had imagined. The day had brought no grand revelations, no dramatic reconciliations. Instead, it had given us something perhaps more valuable, a chance to see each other as we truly were, shaped by the years that had passed, yet still connected by the promise that had brought us back to this shore. As darkness began to fall, we parted ways, agreeing to meet again the next day. I walked back to my inn, my mind whirling with conflicting emotions. I had found Arthur, yes, but had I found answers? Or had this encounter only raised more questions about the choices I had made and the life I had left behind? I fell asleep that night to the sound of distant waves, my dreams a confusing mix of past and present, of the girl I had been and the woman I had become. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring new challenges, new conversations, and perhaps, finally, some resolution to the promise that had lingered between us for 20 long years. The following days unfolded like a delicate dance, Arthur and I circling each other, drawing closer only to retreat again. We spent our time exploring the town and its surroundings, each familiar location unearthing memories we had long buried. The old lighthouse, the secluded coves, the bustling fish market, all served as backdrops to our tentative reconnection. As we walked and talked, the years between us began to peel away, revealing the people we had become. I learned of Arthur's passionate work in marine conservation, his eyes lighting up as he spoke of protecting the oceans he had always loved. In turn, I shared stories of high-profile cases and the relentless pace of city life, realizing as I did so how hollow some of my achievements now sounded. It was on the third day, as we sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking the sea, that the first cracks in our careful facades began to show. Arthur spoke of his failed marriage, the pain in his voice palpable as he described how his dedication to his work had slowly eroded his relationship. I found myself opening up about my own struggles, the loneliness of success, the nagging feeling that something vital was missing from my life. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Casting long shadows across the water, we finally broached the subject we had been avoiding. Our parting, 20 years ago, had been fraught with misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. Now, with the wisdom of years behind us, we began to unravel the tangled threads of our shared past. I admitted to the fear that had driven me away. Fear of being trapped in a small town, of never reaching my potential. Arthur confessed to his own insecurities, his belief that he could never offer me the life I deserved. We spoke of the letters unwritten, the calls unmade, each missed opportunity a stone in the wall that had grown between us. As night fell, we made our way back to the town, the weight of our confessions hanging heavy in the air. Yet there was also a sense of relief, as if by acknowledging our past mistakes, we had opened the door to something new. The next day brought a storm, fierce winds and lashing rain keeping us indoors. We found ourselves in a small cafe, the pattering of rain against the windows creating a cocoon of intimacy. Here, sheltered from the world outside, we delved deeper into our lives, sharing hopes, regrets, and dreams we had never dared to voice before. I spoke of my growing disillusionment with my career, the nagging feeling that I had sacrificed too much in pursuit of success. Arthur revealed his own struggles, the constant battle between his love for his work and his desire for a deeper personal connection. As the storm raged outside, mirroring the tumult of emotions within, I found myself seeing Arthur in a new light. The boy I had loved had grown into a man of depth and complexity, his passions and flaws intertwined in a way that was utterly compelling. Yet even as we grew closer, I felt a sense of unease growing within me. The life I had built, the career I had fought so hard for seemed increasingly distant, like a fading dream. I found myself torn between the comfort of the familiar and the allure of what might be. As the days passed, this internal conflict grew stronger. I began to question everything: variety, my choices, my values, the very foundation of the life I had constructed. Arthur, too, seemed to be grappling with his own demons, his usual confidence giving way to moments of doubt and introspection. We continued to meet each day, our conversations growing more intense, more raw. We argued, we laughed, we sat in companionable silence. Each interaction peeled back another layer, revealing the core of who we were and who we might become. One evening, as we walked along the moonlit beach, the tension between us finally reached a breaking point. Words that had been held back for years came pouring out. Recriminations, apologies, declarations of feelings long suppressed. The sound of crashing waves provided a backdrop to our emotional catharsis, nature itself seeming to echo the turmoil in our hearts. As we stood there, breathless and emotionally drained, I realized that we had reached a crossroads. The carefully constructed narratives of our lives had been dismantled, leaving us exposed and vulnerable. What we would build from these ruins remained to be seen. That night, as I lay awake in my room at the inn, I found myself at a precipice. The life I had known, with its predictable rhythms and hard-won successes, lay behind me. Ahead, shrouded in mist and uncertainty, was a future I had never allowed myself to imagine. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I made a decision. Whatever came next, whether it involved Arthur or not, I knew I could no longer return to the life I had left behind. The truths we had unearthed over the past days had changed me irrevocably. With this realization came a sense of both liberation and terror. As I watched the sun rise over the ocean, I steeled myself for the conversations and decisions that lay ahead. The promise that had brought me here had been fulfilled, but its consequences were only just beginning to unfold. The day dawned with an ominous sky, dark clouds rolling in from the horizon, mirroring the tumultuous emotions that had been stirred up in the wake of our revelations. The air was heavy with the promise of rain, charged with an electric tension that seemed to permeate everything. I had arranged to meet Arthur at our usual spot on the beach, but as I made my way there, the first fat droplets of rain began to fall. By the time I reached the shoreline, the gentle patter had transformed into a steady downpour. I spotted Arthur in the distance, his figure blurred by the curtain of rain. As I approached, the wind picked up, whipping my hair around my face and drowning out any possibility of conversation. Arthur gestured towards a nearby beach house, its weathered wooden structure offering the only shelter in sight. We ran towards it, our feet sinking into the wet sand, the rain soaking through our clothes. The beach house was clearly abandoned, its windows boarded up and its paint peeling. But the porch roof was intact, providing a refuge from the intensifying storm. We huddled under its shelter, watching as lightning forked across the sky and thunder rumbled ominously. Forced into close proximity by the narrow porch, I became acutely aware of Arthur's presence. The scent of rain mingled with the saltiness of his skin, and I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Our eyes met, and in that moment, the tension that had been building between us since our reunion reached a fever pitch. What happened next was as inevitable as the storm itself. Our lips met in a desperate, passionate kiss, years of suppressed longing and unresolved feelings pouring out in a single electric moment. The world around us faded away, the howling wind and crashing waves becoming a distant backdrop to the storm raging within us. When we finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, reality came crashing back. The implications of what we had done, of the lines we had crossed, hung heavy in the air between us. We stood in silence, the rhythm of the rain filling the void where words failed us. As the storm continued to rage, we found ourselves trapped in this liminal space, caught between the past we had shared and the uncertain future that lay ahead. We talked, haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency, laying bare our fears, our regrets, our deepest desires. Arthur spoke of his lingering love for me, of how no one had ever measured up to the memory of what we had shared. I confessed my own doubts about the life I had chosen, the growing realization that success and fulfillment were not always synonymous. As night fell and the storm showed no signs of abating, we were forced to confront the reality of our situation. We were stranded, cut off from the town by the flooded beach road, with no choice but to wait out the tempest together. In the dim light of an old emergency lantern we found in the beach house, we continued our conversation, delving deeper into the choices that had led us to this moment. The storm outside seemed to mirror the emotional maelstrom within, each crack of thunder punctuating a painful truth or long-buried secret. As the hours wore on, exhaustion began to set in. We found an old mattress in a corner of the beach house, its musty smell a small price to pay for a modicum of comfort. Lying side by side in the darkness, listening to the relentless pounding of the rain, we drifted in and out of sleep, our dreams intertwining with reality. In those hazy moments between wakefulness and slumber, the boundaries between past and present, between what was and what could be, seemed to blur. I found myself questioning everything I had believed about my life, my choices, my very identity. As dawn broke, the storm finally began to subside. We emerged from our shelter, blinking in the pale morning light, to find a world transformed. The beach was strewn with debris, the familiar landscape altered by the force of the tempest. Standing there, surveying the aftermath of the storm, I felt a profound shift within myself. The carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart lay in ruins, washed away by the tide of emotions the night had unleashed. Arthur and I looked at each other, the weight of all that had transpired hanging between us. We were different people now, changed not just by the years that had passed, but by this night of brutal honesty and raw vulnerability. As we made our way back towards the town, picking our way through the storm's detritus, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The tempest had not just ravaged the physical landscape, it had irrevocably altered the terrain of our hearts and minds. What lay ahead was uncertain, fraught with complications and difficult decisions. But as we walked side by side, our footprints marking a new path in the rain-washed sand, I felt a glimmer of something I had not experienced in years: hope. The days following the storm unfolded in a haze of conflicting emotions and unspoken tensions. The physical landscape of the town had been altered, mirroring the seismic shifts in my internal world. As the community banded together to clear debris and repair damage, I found myself adrift, caught between the pull of my old life and the tantalizing possibility of a new beginning. Arthur and I maintained a careful distance, the intensity of our night in the beach house hanging between us like a tangible presence. We moved through the town like ghosts, helping with the cleanup efforts but never quite meeting each other's eyes. The stolen glances and accidental brushes of hands spoke volumes, each fleeting contact charged with unresolved desire and lingering questions. As the week wore on, I received increasingly urgent messages from my law firm. Cases were piling up, clients were demanding my attention, and my carefully cultivated professional reputation was beginning to show cracks. The real world was intruding on this interlude, demanding that I make a choice. I spent long hours walking along the shoreline, watching as the ocean reclaimed its rhythm after the chaos of the storm. The steady ebb and flow of the waves seemed to mock my indecision. Nature's constancy, a stark contrast to my inner turmoil. Memories of my life in the city began to surface with increasing frequency. I thought of my sleek apartment, my corner office with its view of the skyline, the respect I had earned through years of relentless work. These images, once a source of pride, now felt hollow, like props in a play I had been performing without realizing it. Yet the prospect of walking away from it all terrified me. I had spent 2 decades building that life, sacrificing personal relationships and simple pleasures in pursuit of success. Could I really abandon it all for the promise of what might be? And what of Arthur? He had his own life here, his own passions and commitments. Was I prepared to uproot myself, to start anew in this small coastal town that had once felt so confining? As these questions swirled in my mind, I found myself drawn to the places Arthur and I had frequented in our youth. The old pier, where we had shared our dreams. The hidden cove where we had first kissed. The clifftop where we had watched countless sunsets. Each location was infused with bittersweet memories, reminders of the innocence we had lost and the love we had never fully relinquished. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I made my way to the lighthouse. Its steady beam cutting through the gathering darkness seemed to offer a promise of guidance, of safe harbor in stormy seas. As I climbed the winding stairs to the top, my mind raced with the decisions that lay before me. Each step felt weighted with the potential consequences of my choices. When I reached the observation deck, I was breathless, not just from the physical exertion, but from the emotional weight I carried. The view from the top was breathtaking. The town lay spread out below, its lights twinkling in the twilight. Beyond, the vast expanse of the ocean stretched to the horizon, dark and mysterious. As I stood there, the wind whipping around me, I felt a sense of clarity begin to emerge. I realized that the storm had not just ravaged the physical landscape. It had stripped away the layers of pretense and self-deception I had built up over the years. Standing there, high above the world I had known, I saw my life with a new perspective. The career I had pursued so relentlessly suddenly seemed less like an achievement and more like a cage I had built for myself. The accolades and material success I had accumulated felt empty in comparison to the raw, honest connection I had rediscovered with Arthur. Yet I also recognized that there was no going back to the simplicity of our youthful romance. We were different people now, shaped by our experiences and choices. Whatever future we might have together would need to be built on the foundation of who we had become, not who we once were. As night fell and the stars began to emerge, twinkling defiantly against the vast darkness, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The path forward was still unclear, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But for the first time since I had returned to this town, I felt ready to face those challenges head-on. Descending from the lighthouse, each step felt lighter than the last. I had not made any grand decisions or sweeping declarations, but I had found something perhaps more valuable: the courage to embrace uncertainty, to step off the carefully plotted course of my life and into the unknown. As I made my way back to the inn, the sound of waves crashing against the shore seemed to whisper of possibilities, of adventures yet to come. The girl who had left this town 2 decades ago, driven by ambition and fear, was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to write a new chapter, whatever it might hold. The aftermath of the storm had cleared away more than just physical debris. It had swept away the illusions and compromises that had defined my life for so long. What would grow in their place remained to be seen. But as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a sense of anticipation I had not experienced in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations with Arthur, new decisions to be made. But for now, I allowed myself to rest, lulled by the distant sound of waves and the promise of a future yet unwritten. The dawn broke with a clarity that seemed to mirror my newfound resolve. I rose early, drawn to the beach by an instinct I could not explain. As I approached our spot, I saw Arthur already there, a solitary figure silhouetted against the rising sun. My heart quickened as I drew near, the weight of our shared history and the possibilities of our future hanging in the air between us. We stood side by side, watching as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The beach was quiet, save for the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the distant cries of seagulls. In this moment of tranquility, the chaos of the past days seemed to recede, leaving only the essence of who we were and what we meant to each other. Without speaking, we began to walk, retracing the steps we had taken so many years ago. Each familiar landmark we passed seemed to whisper of memories long buried. The rock where we had carved our initials, the driftwood log that had been our favorite resting spot, the tidal pool where we had spent hours exploring. As we walked, I felt the years melting away. The ambitious lawyer I had become, the successful marine biologist Arthur had grown into. These identities seemed to blur and shift, revealing the core of who we truly were beneath the layers of our adult lives. We reached the exact spot where 2 decades earlier we had made our youthful promise. Standing there, the significance of the moment was not lost on either of us. The air seemed charged with possibility, with words unspoken and feelings long suppressed. In the silence, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The pain of our parting, the years of separation, the unexpected reunion. All of it had led us here, to this moment of truth. I thought of the life I had built, the successes I had achieved, and realized with startling clarity that none of it held meaning without love, without connection. Arthur's presence beside me was solid, reassuring. I could sense his own internal struggle, the battle between the life he had created here and the promise of what we could be together. The tension between us was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse with each beat of our hearts. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the sand beneath our feet, I felt a shift within myself. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued me since my return began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of certainty I had not felt in years. I turned to Arthur, meeting his gaze fully for the first time since the night of the storm. In his eyes, I saw a reflection of my own emotions: hope, fear, longing, and above all, love. A love that had endured separation, that had matured and deepened with time, that now stood on the precipice of a new beginning. In that moment, without words, we made our decision. It was not a choice made lightly, nor one without complications. We both knew that the path ahead would be challenging, fraught with obstacles and uncertainties. But we also knew with a bone-deep certainty that it was a path we wanted to walk together. Our hands found each other, fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both familiar and thrillingly new. With this simple touch, we sealed our renewed promise. Not the naive vow of our youth, but a mature commitment to face whatever lay ahead as partners, as equals. As we stood there, the warmth of the sun enveloping us, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The life I had known, with its rigid structures and carefully plotted course, was behind me. Ahead lay uncertainty, yes, but also the promise of joy, of growth, of a love rekindled and strengthened by the years we had spent apart. We began to walk back towards the town, our joined hands a physical manifestation of our decision. Each step felt like a new beginning, a fresh page in the story of our lives. The practical details, my resignation from the law firm, the merging of our lives, the challenges of building a relationship after so many years apart, all of these lay ahead. But in this moment, they seemed manageable, even exciting, obstacles to be faced together. As we reached the edge of the beach, I paused for one last look at the ocean. The vastness of it, once a symbol of the distance between us, now seemed to represent the endless possibilities that lay ahead. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the salty air, and turned towards the future we had chosen. Our renewed promise was not an ending, but a beginning. It was a commitment to rediscover each other, to build something new from the foundation of our shared past. As we walked into town, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, I felt a sense of anticipation I had not experienced in years. The girl who had left this beach 2 decades ago, full of ambition and fear, was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to embrace love, to take risks, to live fully. And beside me walked the man who had always held my heart, now ready to build a future together. As we disappeared into the bustling streets of the town, the beach behind us stood as a silent witness to our renewed promise. The waves continued their eternal dance with the shore, a reminder that some things endure, that love, like the ocean, has the power to weather any storm.
Hey there, Unraveling Ties family. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope it touched your heart, made you think, or even inspired you in some way. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this story. Don't be shy. Leave a comment below and share your perspective with our community. Your voice matters to us. If you enjoyed today's story and want to be a part of our journey as we unravel the complexities of human relationships, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a new story. We're always eager to explore new angles and dive into the themes that resonate with you the most. So tell us, what kind of stories would you like to see in upcoming episodes? Your input helps us create content that you'll love. And hey, if today's story reminded you of a personal experience or a tale you'd like to share, we're all ears. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments. Who knows, your story might even inspire a future Unraveling Ties episode. Once again, thank you for being a part of the Unraveling Ties family. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, keep embracing the ties that bind us and never stop exploring the depths of the human heart. See you in the next video.